The thought of a shark attack sparks fear and fascination. But the reality is far from Hollywood's dramatic portrayals. These powerful predators roam the oceans, yet attacks on humans are rare. Most encounters happen by mistake. Sharks, driven by curiosity, often misidentify swimmers or surfers. Despite their razor-sharp teeth and stealthy nature, sharks play a crucial role in marine ecosystems. Instead of fearing them, we should focus on understanding and respecting their place in the ocean. After all, we are visitors in their world. On April 1, 2025, the sun gleamed off the turquoise waters of the South African coast as Yekaterina Vasilyeva leaned over the railing of a private boat, adjusting her camera to capture the sight of a great white shark cutting through the waves below. The day had started like any other on her adventure trips. Thrilling, full of energy, and most importantly, planned. But adventure, by its very nature, was unpredictable. The group aboard the small vessel had set out from Gansbai, a well-known hotspot for cage diving with sharks. Yekaterina, a 33-year-old travel blogger from St. Petersburg, had been documenting her journey across Africa, sharing the wonders of the wild with her growing audience. The boat rocked slightly as she stepped closer to the edge, angling her shot for the perfect video. A gust of wind swept through and her foot slipped against the damp, slick deck. Instantly, she was over the railing, plunging into the water below. A scream ripped through the air as the group above realized what had happened. Yekaterina surfaced, coughing, flailing to stay afloat. Panic surged through her veins as she registered her situation. No cage, no protection, and in one of the most dangerous shark-filled waters on the planet. Her knee had struck the boat's metal frame on the way down, splitting the skin. Blood seeped into the water, sending a signal no predator could ignore. The first shadow appeared almost immediately, a hulking mass that lurked just below the surface. The shark, nearly 15 feet long, moved with an unsettling grace. It circled once, then again, each rotation pulling it closer. The boat crew scrambled for action. Someone threw out a flotation device. Another reached for the emergency radio. But none of them could stop what came next. Without warning, the great white surged forward, its powerful tail propelling it with terrifying speed. Yekaterina barely had time to react before an unbearable force clamped down on her thigh. Searing pain shot through her body as the shark's serrated teeth tore into flesh, shaking her violently. She screamed, thrashing, trying to pry herself free. The boat crew watched in horror as the water frothed red around her. Desperate, Yekaterina reached for the boat's ladder. Adrenaline fueled her limbs as she kicked with all her strength, trying to pull herself up. The shark, however, had other plans. It lunged again, its teeth sinking deep into her side and left arm. A sickening crunch reverberated through the water as the shark twisted, trying to pull her back under. The force of the attack slammed her against the hull. Her friends on board reacted with frantic determination. Two leaned dangerously over the edge, grabbing at her flailing limbs. A deckhand swung a pole, jabbing it against the shark's snout in a desperate attempt to deter it. After what felt like an eternity, the predator loosened its grip just long enough for the crew to yank Yekaterina onto the deck. She collapsed, her body mangled and bleeding profusely. Her thigh was torn open, muscle and bone visible beneath shredded skin. Deep lacerations crisscrossed her torso, her arm nearly useless from the bites. Yet against all odds, she was alive. The boat's captain wasted no time, radioing for an emergency airlift. Tourniquets were tied hastily around her wounds, and pressure was applied to slow the bleeding. Yekaterina drifted in and out of consciousness as the pain threatened to pull her under again, but she held on. By the time the helicopter arrived, her pulse was weak but present. Rushed to a hospital in Cape Town, she underwent multiple emergency surgeries. Doctors fought to save her leg, and though she faced months of rehabilitation, she survived the ordeal. The attack became a grim reminder of the raw power of the ocean and its apex predators. The incident made international headlines, a chilling testament to nature's unpredictability and the thin line between adventure and disaster. Yekaterina, ever the storyteller, later recounted her brush with death, sharing her experience with the same raw honesty that had made her a beloved figure among travel enthusiasts. And though she would never swim in open water again, her passion for the world remained unshaken. The ocean had left its mark on her body and soul, but it had not taken her spirit. In the weeks following her survival, Yekaterina found herself struggling with the psychological toll of the attack. Nightmares plagued her sleep, each one dragging her back into the cold, churning sea, reliving the moment the shark's jaws clamped onto her flesh. The slightest sound of water lapping against a shore sent an icy dread down her spine. She had escaped with her life, but part of her still felt trapped in that moment, floating helplessly as a predator decided her fate. Her recovery was painstaking. Months of physical therapy became routine, forcing her to relearn how to use her left arm and rebuild the strength in her battered leg. Her doctors were impressed with her resilience, though the scars left behind were unavoidable. The wounds had healed, but each mark on her skin told the story of her encounter. Despite the pain, she refused to let her trauma define her. Instead, she wrote about it extensively, detailing her journey from terror to healing in a blog series that garnered massive attention. Eventually, filmmakers and journalists contacted her, eager to document her harrowing experience. Offers for interviews flooded her inbox, but she was selective, choosing only those who would treat her story with the respect it deserved. A documentary was even in the works, set to recount the attack alongside expert analysis of shark behavior. Yekaterina wanted to ensure that despite her tragedy, the film wouldn't cast sharks as mindless killers, but as apex predators acting on instinct in their natural habitat. By the time a full year had passed, she had transformed from victim to advocate. Yekaterina used her platform to educate people about the importance of marine conservation and responsible tourism. She spoke at events, sharing her story not as a cautionary tale meant to instill fear, but as a lesson in respect for the wild. While she would never again wade into the open ocean, she had found a new purpose that allowed her to remain connected to the world she loved, even from a safe distance. The Atlantic waters off the coast of North Carolina were particularly choppy that late summer afternoon in 2017. The U.S. Coast Guard had received a distress call from a stranded vessel battling strong currents near Cape Hatteras, a region notorious for shipwrecks and sudden storms. The team, led by 28-year-old Tyler Hughes, arrived swiftly in their rescue boat, ready to assist. The operation was routine at first. Tyler, a seasoned swimmer with years of experience in high-risk rescues, was prepared to enter the water. The stranded vessel, a small fishing boat, had lost engine power and was slowly dragged out to sea. As the Coast Guard secured lines to stabilize the ship, Tyler plunged into the water to assist one of the fishermen struggling against the waves. The sea was darker than usual, the recent turbulence churning up sand and debris. Tyler reached the fisherman, guiding him toward the rescue boat. The moment seemed under control until an unexpected force tore through the water. A violent tug yanked Tyler backward, an excruciating pain radiating from his right leg. In an instant, the familiar waters turned into a scene of chaos. A bull shark had struck, its powerful jaws clamping just above his ankle. The force of the bite sent a shockwave of agony through his body, but Tyler's training overrode the panic. He twisted instinctively, trying to wrench his leg free. The shark thrashed, shaking its head side to side, its rough skin scraping against him as he struggled. The water around them turned red as Tyler fought to pull himself away. His team on the boat had seen the attack unfold and sprang into action. One of his crewmates, Marcus Ellison, grabbed a gaff pole, jabbing it into the water near the shark to deter it. The shark, momentarily startled, released its grip. Tyler wasted no time and kicked toward the surface, using his arms to propel himself while his injured leg dragged behind him. The team hauled him aboard, his leg bleeding heavily. A makeshift tourniquet was applied immediately. Tyler clenched his jaw, his breathing ragged as his team worked to stop the bleeding. The pain was unbearable, but he remained conscious, his survival instincts still firing. The boat sped toward shore where emergency responders were waiting. Tyler was rushed to a nearby hospital in Morehead City. The bite had torn through muscle and tissue, narrowly missing major arteries. He underwent emergency surgery to repair the damage, and the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. The attack left him with deep scars, both physical and psychological. He spent months in rehabilitation, regaining strength in his leg. While the incident shook him, it did not deter his dedication to service. Despite the trauma, Tyler eventually returned to duty, though with a newfound respect for the unpredictable dangers of the ocean. The encounter remained etched in his memory, a stark reminder that even those trained to handle perilous situations were never truly safe in the wild expanse of the sea. The months of recovery were grueling, Physical therapy became his daily routine, each session testing his endurance as he fought to regain mobility. His doctors warned him that he might never regain full strength in his leg, but Tyler refused to accept defeat. The pain was excruciating at times, especially in the early stages, but his determination remained unwavering. He worked through the agony, pushing himself harder each day, unwilling to let the attack define his future. His fellow Coast Guard members visited regularly, offering support and encouragement, reinforcing the bond solidified through years of shared risks and rescues. While the physical wounds gradually healed, the psychological toll proved more challenging. Tyler found himself reliving the attack in nightmares, waking in a cold sweat with the phantom sensation of teeth sinking into his flesh. At first, he dismissed the fear, bottling it up, unwilling to appear weak before his colleagues. However, as weeks turned to months, the anxiety remained, an unwelcome shadow that followed him. Eventually, he sought professional help, undergoing therapy to cope with the trauma. Speaking about the attack, acknowledging the fear, and learning to navigate his emotions became as much a part of his recovery as the physical rehabilitation. Despite everything, Tyler yearned to return to the sea. The ocean, once his greatest ally, now felt like an adversary he needed to conquer again. His first time back in the water was nerve-wracking. The sensation of waves around him triggered a rush of adrenaline, his pulse quickening with an almost primal fear. But as he floated, breathing deeply, he reminded himself why he had chosen this path. Slowly, confidence replaced fear. And though the memory of the attack would always linger, it no longer controlled him. Tyler's return to active duty was celebrated among his colleagues. The ordeal tested his resilience and deepened his understanding of the risks they all faced. He became an advocate for better safety measures during water rescues, working closely with training officers to develop protocols that minimized risks for swimmers in shark-prone waters. His story was shared in training sessions, a powerful reminder that even the most seasoned rescuers were not immune to the unpredictability of the sea. Years later, Tyler still bore the scars from that fateful day, both visible and invisible. Yet rather than viewing them as a mark of misfortune, he saw them as symbols of survival. His journey from the depths of fear and pain to regaining control of his life became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Whether battling waves, facing storms, or enduring the trauma of an unexpected attack, he had emerged stronger, ready to continue his mission of saving lives on the unpredictable waters of the Atlantic. In the summer of 2009, a group of fishermen set sail from a small coastal village in the Philippines, heading into the vast and unpredictable waters of the Sulu Sea. Among them was Rafael Torres, a 45-year-old seasoned fisherman known for his deep knowledge of the ocean and his resilience against its dangers. The crew of 6 men had embarked on what was supposed to be a routine multi-day fishing expedition, relying on their instincts and experience to navigate the open sea. The waters of the Sulu Sea were as rich with marine life as they were notorious for their lurking predators. Tiger sharks, known for their aggressive tendencies, prowled these depths, though attacks on humans were rare. Aware of the risks, the fishermen carried on with their work as they had countless times before, casting their nets in the early morning light and pulling in their catches with precision. On the second night, the ocean grew restless as a storm brewed in the distance. The boat, a modest wooden vessel reinforced for rough waters, bobbed violently against the rising waves. The men worked swiftly, securing their gear and preparing for the worst. Despite their precautions, a rogue wave slammed into the side of the boat with tremendous force, sending Rafael and 2 others overboard. The men on deck scrambled to throw ropes and life preservers into the water, their shouts barely audible over the howling wind and crashing surf. Rafael resurfaced, disoriented but conscious, gulping in mouthfuls of salt water as he struggled to keep afloat. The other 2 men fought against the current, slowly progressing toward the boat, but Rafael drifted farther away. The storm intensified, making a swift rescue nearly impossible. With no choice but to swim toward the nearest visible landmass, a small, uninhabited island several miles away, Rafael steeled himself for the grueling journey ahead. The hours dragged on as Rafael pushed through exhaustion and the relentless pull of the sea. His body ached, and his limbs felt heavier with each stroke. Just when the distant shoreline seemed within reach, A sudden movement beneath him sent a surge of panic through his body. A massive tiger shark, its dark silhouette cutting through the murky water, had appeared just below. At first, the shark circled him, drawn by the scent of sweat, fear, and possibly a minor scrape he had sustained during the fall. Raphael knew better than to thrash or panic. He tried to remain calm, maintaining a slow, deliberate pace, but the shark was persistent. It circled tighter, its curiosity escalating into something far more sinister. Then, without warning, the predator struck, clamping its powerful jaws onto Raphael's lower leg. The roar of the sea swallowed a piercing scream. The shark thrashed violently, dragging Raphael beneath the surface. Blood clouded the water as he struggled, kicking at the predator with his free leg, but the beast was relentless. The fishermen on the boat, helpless against the raw power of nature, could only watch in horror as Raphael was pulled deeper and deeper, his form disappearing beneath the waves. The attack was over in seconds. The water settled, save for the ripples of disturbed currents and a dark stain spreading outward. Raphael never resurfaced. Back on the boat, the crew was gripped with shock and grief. With the storm still raging, they had no choice but to retreat, their hearts heavy with the weight of their loss. When they finally reached the safety of their village, they relayed the tragic news. The community mourned Raphael, holding a small ceremony in his honor. His family, though devastated, found some solace in the knowledge that he had died in the waters he had spent his life mastering. The attack reignited fears in the local fishing communities, a grim reminder of the ocean's unpredictable dangers. Though tiger sharks had always been a part of these waters, the knowledge that one had claimed the life of one of their own made every venture into the sea a more daunting endeavor. Even seasoned fishermen cast their nets with a renewed sense of caution, knowing that beneath the shimmering surface, predators lurked, waiting for their moment to strike. The following weeks saw a noticeable shift in the village. Some fishermen, shaken by the tragedy, hesitated to return to sea. In contrast, others clung to the belief that Raphael's fate was an anomaly, an unfortunate twist of nature that could not define their livelihood. Superstitions spread, with elders claiming that the sea had demanded a sacrifice, while younger men debated whether it was time to find safer waters for their trade. Yet, no matter the beliefs, Raphael's absence was felt like a deep wound in the community. After hearing about the attack, a group of divers from the nearest city arrived at the village. They sought to study the shark population in the area, hoping to understand if the aggression was part of a larger pattern. Some villagers opposed their efforts, fearing that disturbing the balance of the sea would only invite more misfortune. Others, desperate for answers, supported learning more about the creatures that shared their waters. The divers set out on multiple expeditions, capturing footage of the sharks, studying their migration habits, and advising the fishermen on ways to reduce future encounters. Months passed, and the ocean's pull proved too strong for many fishermen to resist. Despite the fears, they returned to their boats, their hands again casting nets into the depths. Raphael's eldest son, Miguel, barely in his 20s, took his father's place among the crew. Though grief weighed heavily on him, he refused to let fear dictate his fate. Every time he ventured out, he carried a small wooden carving of his father's favorite fish, a symbol of protection and remembrance. On quiet nights when the waves were calm, the fishermen would sit together, speaking in hushed tones about Raphael's last moments. Some swore that on the darkest nights, when the sea was eerily still, they could see a figure just beyond the reach of their lanterns, a lone swimmer making his way toward shore, forever chasing the safety that had eluded him on that fateful night. In June 2003, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina's pristine shores, welcomed countless tourists seeking sun and relaxation. Among them were Lena Porter and Daniel Hayes, two graduate students from a university who had connected through mutual friends. The barrier island, known for its 12 miles of immaculate beaches and generally safe swimming conditions, rarely saw dangerous marine life approach its shores. Shark attacks in the area were uncommon, with only 3 minor incidents recorded in the previous decade. Lena, a biochemistry major passionate about marine ecosystems, had suggested the location for their first date. Daniel, studying architectural engineering, had eagerly agreed, impressed by her outdoor enthusiasm. They had spent weeks exchanging messages online, and both felt nervous about meeting in person for the first time. The morning had gone perfectly. They walked along the shoreline, collecting shells and discussing their families, studies, and aspirations. The conversation flowed easily, confirming what they had both suspected from their online interactions. There was definite chemistry between them. By early afternoon, with the temperature climbing into the high 80s, Lena suggested they cool off with a swim. The beach they had chosen was less crowded than the popular tourist spots. It was a local favorite, a secluded stretch where tall seagrass swayed along the dunes, and the water gradated from clear turquoise to deep blue. Only a few families were scattered along the sand, most staying close to shore or relaxing under colorful umbrellas. Lena and Daniel waded in, laughing as they adjusted to the water temperature. Daniel mentioned that he hadn't been swimming in the ocean since childhood vacations with his parents. More experienced, Lena encouraged him to come out deeper, where they could properly swim. She explained how the tides worked in the area and assured him it was perfectly safe. They swam about 50 yards offshore where the water reached just above their shoulders when standing. The gentle waves lifted them rhythmically as they treaded water and continued their conversation. Daniel was explaining his thesis project when Lena suddenly disappeared beneath the surface with a startled gasp that quickly became a gurgling scream. Daniel thought for a split second that she was playing a joke, until he saw the blood spreading through the water. His mind struggled to process what was happening. Later, he would tell first responders that everything seemed to slow down at that moment. The realization that a shark was attacking Lena, the understanding that he was just feet away from the predator, and the paralyzing fear that froze his limbs. The shark, later identified as a juvenile great white approximately 10 feet long, had struck from below, clamping its jaws around Lena's right thigh. Marine biologists would later speculate that the shark had mistaken her silhouette for that of a seal when viewed from below. Something in Daniel's mind shifted from terror to action. Without conscious thought, he lunged toward Lena, grabbing her under her arms as she briefly resurfaced. Her face was contorted in pain and shock, her mouth open in a silent scream. Daniel kicked wildly, simultaneously trying to pull her toward shore and keep the shark at bay. Through what experts would later call remarkable good fortune, the shark released its grip. This unusual behavior possibly resulted from the shark recognizing that Lena was not its typical prey after the initial bite, a common explanation for why many shark attacks on humans don't proceed to consumption. The water around them clouded red as Daniel struggled to keep Lena's head above water. She was going into shock, her skin pale and clammy despite the warm water. Her wounded leg trailed uselessly behind her as Daniel fought against waves and current to move them shoreward. Their struggle caught the attention of beachgoers. Two men, later identified as off-duty firefighter Winston Abernathy and his brother-in-law, rushed into the water. They helped drag Lena onto the sand while someone else called emergency services. On the beach, Winston applied pressure to Lena's wound using beach towels, while his wife, a registered nurse, monitored her vital signs and kept her conscious by asking questions about her name and the date. Daniel, in shock himself, could only watch helplessly as strangers worked to save his date's life. The shark's teeth had torn through skin, fat, and muscle, but miraculously missed the femoral artery. Emergency responders arrived within 12 minutes, stabilized Lena, and transported her to Hilton Head Hospital, where a surgical team was already preparing for her arrival. Lena underwent 7 hours of surgery to repair the damage to her leg. The medical team, led by Dr. Eleanor Fitzpatrick, a specialist in trauma surgery, used over 300 stitches to close the wounds. Lena would later report that Dr. Fitzpatrick had told her she was lucky. The bite pattern suggested the shark had initially gripped her with its front teeth rather than performing a full bite, which would likely have severed her leg completely. Recovery was arduous. Lena spent 3 weeks in the hospital fighting infection and beginning physical therapy. Daniel visited daily, bringing books and takeout food from local restaurants. Their unusual first date became a tentative romance forged in trauma and recovery. 6 months later, Lena walked with only a slight limp. 1 year after the attack, she successfully defended her master's thesis on marine conservation, including a chapter on shark behavior and attack prevention. She became an advocate for shark protection, often emphasizing that her attack was exceedingly rare and resulted from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Daniel and Lena dated for 3 years before marrying in 2006. They settled in Charleston, where Lena worked for a marine conservation nonprofit, and Daniel designed eco-friendly coastal homes. They often joked that theirs was the most memorable first date story at dinner parties, though neither of them ever swam in open ocean water again, preferring pools and very shallow beach wading. The shark that attacked Lena was never seen again in the area. Local tourism suffered briefly following media coverage of the incident, but recovered by the following season. The attack became part of local lore, occasionally referenced by tour guides as they emphasized the statistical rarity of such events, a point that Lena made whenever interviewed about her experience. In 2016, the crystal-clear waters of the Red Sea near Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, concealed danger beneath their azure surface. This region, renowned for its vibrant coral reefs and diverse marine ecosystem, had been a premier diving destination for decades. The Egyptian coastal city had weathered political instability and occasional tourism downturns, but its underwater paradise remained a constant draw for enthusiasts worldwide. Among the regular visitors was Hassan Khalil, a 42-year-old Egyptian spearfisher with 15 years of experience navigating these waters. Hassan grew up in Alexandria but relocated to Sharm el-Sheikh to pursue his passion for the sea. He operated a small dive shop catering to tourists seeking authentic local experiences rather than commercial excursions. His reputation for understanding the Red Sea's intricate ecosystem earned him respect among locals and international diving communities. Though married with 3 children, Hassan often ventured into deeper waters, preferring solitude when hunting. On April 18th, Hassan informed his assistant Tariq Fawaz that he would be spearfishing at a site locals called the Canyon, approximately 2 kilometers offshore. The location was known for larger pelagic fish and occasional visits from oceanic white-tip sharks. These sharks, once abundant throughout tropical oceans, had declined in numbers but maintained a presence in the Red Sea. Marine biologists consider oceanic white-tips among the more dangerous shark species, particularly in open water scenarios, due to their opportunistic nature and boldness. Hassan set out shortly after dawn in his small motorboat, equipped with his custom spear gun, diving knife, and catch bag. The weather conditions were ideal: minimal wind, excellent visibility, and calm seas. He anchored at his preferred spot and prepared for several hours of hunting. According to his diving watch recovered later, he completed 2 successful dives before the incident, reaching depths of approximately 25 meters. On his 3rd dive, Hassan spotted and successfully speared a sizable grouper. The struggle with the powerful fish likely produced vibrations and blood in the water, signals that can attract predators from considerable distances. Marine biologists later theorized that an oceanic white-tip shark detected these distress signals and moved toward Hassan from deeper waters. The shark, estimated to be a 3-meter female, approached as Hassan secured his catch. Oceanographic researcher Dr. Amina Saeed would later explain that the shark likely perceived the struggling fish as potential food rather than targeting Hassan himself. However, when Hassan attempted to protect his catch, the dynamic shifted. The shark, now in predatory mode, attacked with sudden ferocity. The first strike was catastrophic. The shark's powerful jaws closed around Hassan's right arm just below the elbow, severing it almost instantly. The force of the attack tore his buoyancy compensator and caused him to lose his regulator. Disoriented and rapidly losing blood, Hassan struggled toward the surface approximately 15 meters above. 2 American tourists, Bradley Thompson and Justine Winters, were snorkeling about 100 meters away when they noticed an unusual water disturbance. Through their masks, they observed what appeared to be a diver in distress and a large shadow circling beneath. A former lifeguard, Thompson immediately alerted their guide on a nearby boat. The guide, Mahmoud Salah, quickly directed the boat toward Hassan's position, grabbing emergency oxygen and first aid supplies. By the time they reached the area, Hassan had managed to surface, but blood had spread visibly through the water. Mahmoud reported seeing Hassan desperately trying to climb onto his anchored boat, his right arm missing below the elbow. As Mahmoud maneuvered their vessel closer, additional shadows appeared in the water. The scent of blood had attracted at least 2 more oceanic white-tips to the scene. Mahmoud shouted warnings and extended a rescue pole toward Hassan, who was now just 5 meters from safety. In a moment that would haunt witnesses for years, the original shark returned, striking Hassan from below with such force that he was lifted partially out of the water before being dragged beneath the surface. Despite Mahmoud's protests, Thompson dove in but quickly retreated when one of the sharks approached him. The rescue boat circled the area for 20 minutes, hoping Hassan would resurface. Egyptian Coast Guard vessels arrived 30 minutes later, beginning a 3-day search operation. Hassan's body was never recovered. Only his severed hand, still wearing his diving watch, floated to the surface, along with his damaged spear gun. The incident sent shockwaves through the local diving community. Hassan's widow, Fatima Khalil, established a foundation promoting shark awareness and diver safety in her husband's memory. The foundation worked with local authorities to implement new safety protocols for solo divers, including mandatory tracking devices and partner systems. Marine biologist Dr. Saeed used the tragedy to advocate for a better understanding of oceanic whitetip behavior. She emphasized that while the sharks had behaved as predators, such attacks remained extraordinarily rare. Her research team tracked and tagged several oceanic whitetips in the region, providing valuable data on their movements and feeding patterns. Hassan's dive shop continued operating under Tariq's management, with some proceeds supporting the safety foundation. A memorial plaque at the harbor reminded visitors of the Red Sea's beauty and potential dangers. Local guides included Hassan's story in their safety briefings, emphasizing that respectful coexistence with marine predators required knowledge and caution. The incident reinforced the deadly reputation of oceanic whitetips, particularly in open water scenarios where injured prey or humans might trigger predatory responses. Jacques Cousteau had once described this species as the most dangerous of all sharks, particularly in shipwreck scenarios, an assessment tragically validated by Hassan's fate. Egyptian tourism officials acknowledged the tragedy but worked to contextualize the attack's rarity. They implemented enhanced monitoring systems for shark activity near popular diving sites and required all spearfishers to use shark shields, electronic devices designed to deter sharks through electromagnetic pulses. Annually, on the anniversary of Hassan's disappearance, local divers conducted a memorial dive, placing flowers on the water above the canyon. His children, Amira, Ziad, and little Kareem, grew up knowing their father as someone who respected the sea, even as it ultimately claimed him. Following in his father's footsteps, Ziad became a marine conservationist, though he chose to study sharks from research vessels rather than through spearfishing. The witnesses to Hassan's final moments rarely spoke publicly about what they had seen. Thompson returned to the United States and became an advocate for shark conservation, often noting the statistical rarity of fatal attacks compared to the millions of sharks killed annually by humans. Justine Winters wrote a single powerful article for a diving magazine, concluding that what happened to Hassan Khalil represented not the malevolence of nature but its indifference, a predator behaving as evolution had designed it to, in waters humans entered as guests rather than masters. In August 2012, the rugged coastline of Big Sur, California, lived up to its reputation for dramatic natural encounters. This stretch of Central California coastline, where the Santa Lucia Mountains rise abruptly from the Pacific Ocean, had long attracted surfers seeking challenging waves away from crowded beaches. The remote location, with limited cell service and difficult access points, added an element of adventure and risk that drew experienced surfers like Christopher "Chris" Vega. The area had recorded only 2 minor shark encounters in the previous decade, neither resulting in injuries. Marine biologists attributed this relative safety to the deep underwater canyons offshore, which provided natural feeding grounds for great white sharks and kept them typically distant from human recreational areas. However, August marked the beginning of elephant seal pupping season in nearby colonies, occasionally drawing sharks closer to shore. Chris, a 34-year-old architectural photographer from San Luis Obispo, had been surfing Big Sur's challenging breaks for over a decade. With his distinctive shock of prematurely silver hair and weathered tan, Chris was a familiar figure to the small community of local surfers. His weekend ritual involved driving his faded blue Jeep Cherokee up Highway 1 at dawn, parking at one of several unmarked pullouts, and hiking down precarious paths to access isolated coves. On this particular Sunday morning, Chris arrived at a spot locals called Ghost Tree for the bleached driftwood visible at low tide. The conditions seemed perfect. 4 to 6 foot swells rolling in consistently. Offshore winds creating clean faces and unusually warm water for the notoriously chilly Pacific. Only 2 other surfers were visible in the distance. A married couple Chris knew casually from previous outings. After paddling out beyond the break line, Chris spent an hour riding waves successfully. The couple eventually headed in, mentioning plans to drive north to Carmel for lunch. Chris decided to stay for just one more wave, a decision that would change his life. He later told researchers that he remembered thinking how unusually alone he felt once the other surfers disappeared from view. As Chris paddled toward an approaching swell, the first indication of danger came when his yellow 9-foot longboard suddenly lifted from beneath, as though balanced momentarily on something solid in the water. Experienced surfers recognize that such displacement typically has only one explanation in deep water: a large marine animal moving directly beneath the board. Before Chris could process this realization, the water exploded around him. A great white shark, later estimated to be 14 feet long based on bite radius measurements, breached partially from below, its jaws clamping onto the rear third of his surfboard. The impact threw Chris forward, his chest slamming against the board's surface before he tumbled into the water. Marine biologist Dr. Valencia Nguyen, who later documented the incident for the California Shark Research Commission, described the attack as a classic investigatory bite. Great whites often sample unfamiliar objects at the surface, particularly those resembling their natural prey's silhouette when viewed from below. With his legs dangling, Chris's longboard presented a seal-like profile, the preferred prey of adult great whites. Contrary to the movie's depictions of continuous attacks, the shark released the board almost immediately after detecting that it was not a seal. This brief moment allowed Chris to scramble back onto what remained of his board, the rear section now completely missing, with jagged bite marks creating a crescent-shaped void where his feet had been moments earlier. As Chris clung to the damaged board, his surfing experience triggered a critical observation. A second triangular dorsal fin cut through the surface approximately 20 yards away. In his subsequent account to the Museum of Natural History's Shark Encounter Registry, Chris described the horrible realization that he was positioned between 2 great white sharks, possibly a hunting pair, a rare but documented behavior. The second shark, slightly smaller at approximately 12 feet, began swimming in a circular pattern that gradually tightened around Chris's position. Shark researchers note this behavior as a predatory assessment pattern, commonly seen before an attack. Chris remained as motionless as possible, understanding that additional splashing might trigger a predatory response. After what Chris later described as the longest 3 minutes of my life, the first shark returned, approaching directly toward his crippled board. Rather than attacking, it bumped the underside of the board with its snout, a behavior scientists call test bumping, where sharks use sensitive receptors in their snouts to gather information about potential prey. The impact spun Chris and his damaged board in a slow circle. He gripped the edges desperately, fighting against gravity. The smooth fiberglass surface was now slick with seawater in his cold sweat. Each rotation brought him face to face with one shark, and then the other, their dark eyes seeming to evaluate him with what he later described as ancient intelligence. In what marine biologists consider consistent with great white behavior patterns but miraculous from Chris's perspective, both sharks suddenly departed. Their dorsal fins sliced through the surface, heading toward deeper water, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. This behavior aligns with research suggesting great whites often lose interest after determining an object is not their preferred prey. As the sharks retreated, a larger set of waves approached. Chris, still clinging to his mangled board, seized the opportunity. He caught the largest wave, a difficult feat on his damaged equipment, and rode it straight toward shore without attempting to stand. The board's compromised buoyancy made the journey treacherous, but adrenaline and survival instinct propelled him forward. Chris collapsed on the narrow strip of sand, dragging his board beside him. The bite mark measured 32 inches across, approximately the size of a car tire as he would later describe it. The fiberglass was sheared cleanly through, and the polyurethane core was exposed like the cross-section of a honeycomb. After recovering from the immediate shock, Chris faced the daunting task of climbing the steep trail back to his vehicle with his damaged board. He later told a local newspaper that carrying the physical evidence felt crucial. Without it, he feared no one would simultaneously believe his encounter with two great whites. The incident transformed Chris's relationship with the ocean. Unlike many shark encounter survivors who never returned to the water, Chris resumed surfing 6 months later, significantly modifying his habits. He joined a community of surfers who use electronic shark deterrent devices. He never surfed alone again and avoided dawn and dusk sessions when sharks typically feed.